Welcome back to Superbly Said Advanced English Vocabulary and Phrases.
Glad to be back.
Yeah, and today we're actually diving into some material drawn directly from a SpeakDuo lesson.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and before we jump in, I just want to quickly mention that if you go to SpeakDuo.com, you can meet new people from all around the world who are, practicing English on video calls. It's just a really great way to become more confident with your English speaking abilities.
It really is. Unscripted practice is everything. Which actually brings us to our mission for this deep dive.
Right.
We are specifically targeting advanced English learners today. So we're skipping the fluff.
Yeah.
No long introductions, just diving straight into mastering 15 really nuanced idioms and expressions.
Exactly. If you're listening, you already know the basic definitions. We want to get into the hidden mechanics, like how these phrases actually function in a workplace or, say, on an IELTS exam.
Yeah, the stuff that separates textbook memorization from actual fluency.
So let's start with laying the foundation at work. Like, to start any project successfully, you need clarity. I've got a couple phrases here that deal with aligning with your team, but people confuse them a lot.
Let me guess. Get you up to speed and on the same page.
Yes, exactly those two. So if I'm prepping for a meeting with my boss, I might say, before the client arrives, I can get you up to speed on the project milestones. But I want to push back on this a bit. Isn't getting someone up to speed just, summarizing?
Well, that's a really common misconception, actually. But no, it's not.
Really?
Yeah, because the summary is static, right? Getting someone up to speed is all about momentum. Imagine you're standing on a train platform and this train just goes flying by.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
A summary just tells you, how fast that train is moving. But getting you up to speed means putting you in a car, hitting the gas, and physically accelerating until you match the train's speed so you can jump aboard.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's much more active.
Exactly. You're bringing someone to full operational readiness. You aren't just reciting facts.
That makes a lot of sense. So then how does that contrast with being on the same page? Because you could be fully up to speed, but still argue with your boss.
Right, because you can have all the data and still disagree on the strategy.
Yeah.
On the same page is strictly about mutual agreement. And the history here is actually pretty cool. It comes from choral singing hundreds of years ago.
Wait, like a choir?
Yeah, a choir would often just have one massive book that everyone shared. So if you literally weren't on the same page as the person next to you, you were singing a totally different song.
Oh, that would sound awful.
Exactly, total dissonance. So it's about having the same understanding about goals. Like you want everyone singing the same song.
That is such a great visual. So for an IELTS exam, you could say, my manager got us up to speed on the data, but we spent an hour debating until we were finally on the same page.
That's a perfect application.
And if someone still struggles to get on the same page, they might just decide to do everything by the book.
Ah, yes, by the book. This one historically referred to like the ultimate authority, usually religious texts or really strict legal codes.
Right.
But today, doing something by the book in a workplace means strictly following official rules or procedures. You remove all creative interpretation to avoid making mistakes.
I feel like a lot of new managers operate by the book just because they're terrified of messing up.
Oh, 100%. It's safety through compliance.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got our team running at the same speed, singing from the same page, following the rule book, but eventually people have to actually talk to each other.
And that's where the friction starts.
Right. Humans are messy. So let's look at communication quirks. I want to contrast a turn of phrase with splitting hairs.
I love these two. They both deal with a really microscopic focus on detail, but they are polar opposites in terms of vibe. A turn of phrase is highly positive.
Like someone being poetic.
Yeah, think of a master woodworker using a lathe to turn a piece of wood, right? Shaping it into something smooth and unique. A clever turn of phrase is when you shape an idea so perfectly that it becomes memorable.
Okay, I like that. But then we have the negative extreme, splitting hairs. I always think of this as missing the forest for the trees.
It is, but it's even more aggressive than that. Think about a human hair. It's, what, a fraction of a millimeter thick?
Yeah, it's tiny.
It's the ultimate symbol of something too small to matter. So splitting hairs means taking a blade and literally trying to slice that tiny strand in half.
Just totally pointless.
Exactly. It's pure pedantry. Like if your team wastes an hour arguing over the punctuation in a sentence instead of focusing on the actual data and report, you weren't improving the work. You're just splitting hairs.
Which is such a good phrase to drop in IELTS Part 2 if you have to talk about a disagreement. But that kind of pedantic behavior is exactly what leads people to wind someone up.
Yes. And this one is fascinating because it's so deeply rooted in British and Commonwealth culture. Winding someone up is deliberately annoying or teasing someone, often as a joke.
But wait, if I do that at work, isn't that a massive HR risk? Like if I wind my boss up?
Well, yes, it can be risky.
Mm.
The mechanism here is an antique clockwork toy. You put a key in a spring and turn it, winding it tighter and tighter until it snaps.
So you're literally building potential energy in a person.
Right. And culturally, it's often a test of affection, like
Mhm.
harmlessly joking about a coworker's terrible cooking every day just to see them roll their eyes.
Yeah.
But you're right, if you misjudge it, they're going to snap.
Yeah, I'd be careful with that one, especially if the person is high maintenance.
Oh, high maintenance is great. We
Okay.
actually borrowed this from industrial machinery and cars.
Really? Like a luxury car?
Exactly. A normal commuter car needs an oil change twice a year. A Formula One race car needs a team of engineers tweaking it constantly. It requires a lot of attention, time, and effort.
So a high maintenance client isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Like they might pay well.
They might bring in millions, but they just require massive amounts of constant reassurance and hand-holding.
Sort of like a houseplant that needs exactly misted water every 4 hours.
Yes, exactly like that.
Okay, so we've navigated team foundation and the friction of communication. But work, and life really, is full of surprises. Let's talk about the unexpected. I've got 2 phrases here. Out of the blue and off the top of my head.
Okay. Both deal with spontaneity, but the origin of that spontaneity is completely different.
Right, because out of the blue is an external event, right?
Yeah, it comes from a bolt out of the blue, meaning a lightning strike from a totally clear blue sky. No warning, no storm clouds, it just hits you.
So like a former colleague messaging you with a job offer when you didn't even know they were hiring.
Exactly. Whereas off the top of my head is entirely internal. It's producing information from memory without checking.
I've always pictured the brain as like a filing cabinet for this one.
That's a brilliant way to look at it.
Like the verified facts are locked in the bottom drawer, but the casual guesses are just floating right on the top surface.
Yeah, and it functions as the perfect professional buffer phrase.
Yeah.
If your boss asks for exact data, you don't want to guess and be wrong. So you say, well, off the top of my head, I'd say the conference is in June, but let me check.
It's so useful for IELTS too. If an examiner asks a tough question, just say, off the top of my head, I'd guess. It sounds incredibly fluent.
It really does. It lowers the expectation of perfect accuracy while keeping the conversation moving.
Okay, let's shift to managing how we feel. The extremes of the spectrum here. Over the moon versus under the weather.
Idioms in English love verticality. Up is almost always positive and down is negative. Over the moon means extremely pleased. Your happiness has literally transcended earthly gravity.
Like passing a huge exam or getting a short story published.
Exactly. But when you crash back down, you might be feeling under the weather, which means feeling slightly ill.
And I've heard this has a naval origin.
It does. In the days of sailing, if a sailor got sick, they'd be sent below deck, literally placing them under the bad weather that was hitting the ship.
Oh, that makes so much sense. And it's such a polite way to call in sick to work. You don't have to give your boss graphic details about your stomach bug.
Right. You just say, I'm feeling a bit under the weather today. It communicates that you need rest without oversharing.
Which is perfect. Speaking of resting, let's move to our final section. Resolving things and wrapping up the day. Sometimes we make mistakes and have to make it up to someone.
Yeah, relationships kind of operate on an invisible ledger, like balancing scales.
So if I miss a meeting, I've created a deficit in that ledger.
Exactly. You dug a hole. To make it up to someone means you are actively shoveling dirt back into that hole to bring the relationship back up to level. It's compensating for a mistake by doing something kind.
Like staying late to finish work or planning a special dinner for a missed birthday. But the opposite of that active balancing is taking things for granted.
Yes, this comes from legal grants, things given to you permanently. When something is granted, you assume it will always be there.
So you fail to appreciate it.
Right. You take your quiet morning commute for granted until suddenly there's massive construction and you're exhausted by 9 a.m.
Totally. But let's look at the best feeling at work. When there are no mistakes, the commute is great, and a task is a piece of cake.
Which just implies zero struggle. Eating cake is purely celebratory. Booking tickets online, a piece of cake.
And once that easy task is done, you hit the ultimate phrase. You call it a day.
I love the action here. You aren't just stopping work. You are formally declaring the work period complete.
Like a judge.
Yeah. After 8 hours of coding, your eyes hurt and you just say, let's call it a day. You draw a boundary and decide to rest.
Speaking of boundaries, it's time for us to put our listeners to the test. Let's do a rapid-fire quiz focused on workplace and IELTS contexts.
Awesome. This is where you actually apply all that cultural psychology we just talked about.
All right, here are the rules. I'll read the question, present option A, option B, and option C, and I'll make sure to repeat the target phrase. Then I'll say, feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
And I'll jump right in with the correct answer and a quick explanation.
Perfect. Let's do this. Question 1. Which sentence uses the idiomatic phrase, get you up to speed, correctly based on context?
The professional racing driver was instructed to get you up to speed during the final lap of the Grand Prix.
The deeply frustrated young retail clerk aggressively managed to completely drop a white line.
Before the client arrival, I will get you up to speed on the project's recent progress and the key concerns they raised. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer is option C. Option A is a great distractor because it mentions racing. But option C captures that true definition of providing the latest business updates and transferring momentum.
Nice. Question 2. Select the context where the phrase wind someone up is most appropriately used figuratively.
I knew he was just trying to wind me up by claiming the project was canceled, so I didn't take the threat seriously.
The professional clockmaker was instructed to wind someone up the antique timepiece before the store closed.
The incredibly clumsy warehouse inventory clerk accidentally managed to quickly buy some large systems. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
It's option A. Option B uses the literal mechanical definition of winding a clock, but option A illustrates deliberately teasing someone as a joke perfectly.
All right, moving on. Question 3. In which situation does someone accurately utilize the advanced phrase, split hairs, contextually?
The professional hairstyling assistant was instructed to split hairs precisely to maintain the client's complex layers.
We spent an hour splitting hairs over the definition of timely delivery instead of actually improving our shipping logistics.
The completely terrified young wilderness traveler unexpectedly noticed an exceptionally massive, heavy tool chest. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct choice is option B. This is exactly what we meant by arguing over small, unimportant details instead of fixing the actual logistics issue.
Question 4. Which response best demonstrates the advanced phrase, off the top of my head, figuratively?
Off the top of my head, I cannot confirm the exact budget allocation, but I will pull the official report and let you know.
The professional head injury prevention specialist was instructed to keep off the top of my head for safety reasons.
The incredibly clumsy warehouse inventory clerk accidentally managed to quickly catch that white balance. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
That would be option A. It's the ideal way to speak from memory without checking, acting as that professional buffer.
Halfway there. Question 5. How would a professional accurately use the phrase under the weather, contextually?
The professional atmospheric weather mapping scientist was instructed to be under the weather during the hurricane study.
The completely confused amateur theater group unexpectedly decided to proudly paint a clean frame.
I apologize for my lack of focus today, but I am feeling slightly under the weather and might need to leave early to rest. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
It is option C. This verifies what we said about establishing a polite boundary at work to express feeling slightly ill.
Spot on. Question 6. Which scenario perfectly illustrates the meaning of the phrase on the same page, contextually?
The professional book layout designer was instructed to keep the text on the same page for the chapter structure.
Before we start the implementation phase, let's have a brief call to ensure everyone is on the same page regarding our goals.
The incredibly clumsy hotel maintenance worker accidentally managed to completely drop that red tray. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer is option B. It avoids the literal paper and ink trap of option A and shows a shared understanding of goals.
Awesome. Question 7. Which sentence accurately utilizes the advanced phrase, turn of phrase, contextually?
Her unique turn of phrase during the pitch really helped capture the committee's attention and made the proposal memorable.
The professional turn-of-the-century history researcher was instructed to turn of phrase the documents accordingly.
The deeply confused young kitchen assistant accidentally managed to quickly slice a fresh piece of phrase. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
Option A is correct. And I have to say, the idea of slicing a piece of phrase in option C is hilarious. But option A beautifully highlights that clever way of expressing an idea.
And our final one, question 8. Which of the following statements correctly uses call it a day figuratively?
The professional solar power monitoring specialist was instructed to call it a day for the panels when the sun sets.
We have been working on this database optimization for over 10 hours. Let's call it a day and finish the rest tomorrow.
The completely confused amateur artist unexpectedly managed to beautifully paint a giant yellow day. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer is option B. It perfectly captures stopping work for the rest of the day and getting some much-needed rest.
Wow, well, if you got all 8 of those right, you are definitely operating at an advanced level. I think it's officially time for us to call it a day as well.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought. We spent all this time decoding English idioms, but consider the things you take for granted in your own native language.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Like what ancient metaphors or weird cultural nuances are just completely hidden in the idioms you use every single day without even thinking about them. Language isn't just about what you say, it's how you say it and where those words came from.
That is a fascinating thing to think about. Until next time, keep practicing.